Afternoon. It is 3:32 p.m. on Wednesday, April 5th, 2023, and I call the Committee on Housing, Sustainability, and Health meeting to order. Welcome to Council Members Okimoro, Toba, also Council Member Tupola. Let's see, before we start, Council Members Vice Chair Kia Aina and Dos Santos Tam should be joining us shortly. I have some procedural announcements to make pursuant to HRS Section 92-3.7. This meeting will be conducted as a remote meeting by interactive conference technology with the following procedures in effect for the meeting. Members of the public will be allowed to provide oral testimony on all items on the agenda when each agenda item is taken up in two ways, remotely and in person in the council chamber. Persons who have registered to testify remotely by video conference or phone will be called upon first. Once all remote testifiers have testified, I will proceed to in-person testimony in the council chamber. Persons who have not registered will be given an opportunity to testify following the oral testimonies of the registered testifiers. Before testifying, each person shall state their full name. Each speaker will be limited to a 1-minute presentation per item. HRS Section 92-3.7 requires all votes at remote meetings to be conducted by roll call unless unanimous. Therefore, if any objections are noted, I will call for a roll call vote. I don't believe we have any council members participating remotely. Written testimonies, including the testifier's address, email address, and phone number, may be posted by the city clerk and available to the public as described on the posted agenda. As a courtesy, please turn off all cell phones for the duration of this meeting. And I turn first to agenda item number 1 for action resolution 23-43, accepting a gift valued at $2,459 from the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators for an assistant program administrator of the Department of Customer Services to attend the AAMVA's Region 4 conference in Phoenix. I believe we may have customer services. Program Administrator Michael Yagi.
Hello, council members, council chair. My name is Michael Yagi. I'm the Assistant Program Administrator for CSD.
Aloha, thank you for being here. This resolution relates to travel. Is that correct? Okay, could you tell me a little bit more about the conference?
The conference is a gathering of the Region 4, AMVA's Region 4 group. It's basically the west coast of the United States. All the administrators and all the jurisdictions get together. It's a collaboration of a lot of really good information. We get together, we discuss laws and changes and any updates to the motor vehicles. Awesome,
appreciate that. Also recognize the presence of Councilmember Dos Santos. 10 members, are there any questions for the administrator? Hearing none. Clerks, thank you for your time. Clerks, do we have any in-person registered testifiers for this item?
Chair, there are none.
Okay, we will now proceed to remote testimony. Clerks, do we have any remote registered testifiers for this item?
Chair, there are none.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Members, any discussion before I make my recommendation? Sensing none, the chair recommends that resolution 23-43 be reported out for adoption. Any discussion? Any objections? Any reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. Okay, and turning now to agenda item number 2 for action, resolution 23-41, urging partners in care to consider the use of a new tool for the Wahoo Continuum of Care's programs coordinated entry system. This time I'll defer to the introducer of the resolution, Councilmember Tupola.
Thank you so much, Chair, and for having me today in the committee. Members, today the resolution about the VI-SPDAT, also known as the Vulnerability Index Service Prioritization Decision Assistance Tool, is because in the realm of homelessness, the way that we actually do the intake is how they get placed and how they get helped. And so although we do need to continue funding the efforts that we have to help homeless individuals, my main concern is that the tool that we're using, whereby we're able to put people in the right places with the right services, does need to be revised. When we make our decisions, I'll share more about the different articles that have been shared, but the tool itself is not required. Having a tool to get people into housing is required. But the VI SPDAT is not the only tool afforded to us. And I think if Partners in Care is on, they might talk more about that. But what we're saying is that we're still going to be in federal compliance. We're still going to get a tool to use to verify homelessness. But it has been suggested, because many states have come off the VI SPDAT from using it for racial inequalities, for placement, for more community input, that it would behoove us to deter away from this and start to get into a tool that does prioritize Pacific Islanders, people of color, community resources, and as well, even what the client desires, which is not being included in the VI SPDAT right now. So I think it's very key for us to get to a place where we're working with people and using a tool that actually helps us to put them in the right places, and not just for housing, but actually for permanency. Because many of the studies that I've read also show that the tool is not able to keep people there for a very long period of time. So thank you, Chair, for hearing this, and I look forward to hopefully a few people testifying, as it is a common conversation amongst providers.
Mahalo for that, Councilmember Tupola, also recognizing the presence of Vice Chair Kiaina and Councilmember Say. Are there any questions for the introducer, given this is council initiated? Sensing none, I'll turn to Madam Clerk and just ask if we have any in-person registered testifiers for this.
Chair, there are none.
Okay. And sensing no in-person unregistered testifiers, if there are any, do you want to identify yourself? Seeing none, we'll now proceed to remote testimony. Clerks, do we have any remote testifiers for this item?
Chair, there are none. Sorry.
Okay, mahalo, Madam Clerk. Is there anyone on unregistered that would like to testify on this item? Don't
Chair,
see
there are
Partners
none.
in Care. Sorry, you're going to say, Madam.
There are none, Chair.
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you, Madam Clerk. Members, any discussion before I make my recommendation? I would just welcome the conversation from Councilmember Tupola. Note that the Rezo is asking that they consider other tools, and I think you outlined a lot of great information that I'd love to learn more about. So I'm going to recommend that Resolution 23-41 be reported out for adoption. Any discussion? Any objections, reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. And now turning to agenda item number 3, Bill 4, relating to the adoption of the State Energy Conservation Code. So members, please note that we have posted to the agenda the CD1 that was approved by the Committee on Housing, Sustainability, and Health at its meeting on March 1, 2023, and subsequently postponed in committee. And we have posted to the agenda a proposed CD1 date stamped 3/29/23, 5:18 p.m. to this bill. For your information, the summary of the amendments is listed on the agenda. I believe I see Director Matt Gonser present. I believe if you wanted to come up on behalf of the administration, and I think you do have a PowerPoint, I believe, is that correct?
That's correct, Chair.
Okay.
Happy to take the opportunity now or wait till after testimony at your discretion.
I'll just turn back to OCS. I think if we could do testimony first, and that way if any issues come up in testimony as well that come up in your presentation, then they can be discussed, if that works. Okay. Mahalo, Director. So clerks, do we have in-person registered testifiers for this item?
Chair, we have in-person testifiers.
Okay. Is that Ms. Sakum, or let me find my list. Okay, I have first Howard Wick, and then followed by Ms. Stephanie Sakamoto.
Good afternoon. My name is Howard Wigg, Hawaii State Energy Office, testifying in favor. Contrary to common belief, some of these proposed amendments actually do reduce construction costs. C405.2 deals with lighting controls. This item says that if you reduce your lighting power allowance by 20%, you are exempt from daylighting controls. Daylighting controls are really complicated and they cost money to put together to design. It also exempts dimming controls. Dimming controls are expensive. You reduce construction costs. How do you achieve 20% reduction in lighting power allowance? You buy the lamps that are now common off the shelf. LEDs have had an explosion of efficiency in the last few years, and you do off the shelf, you've automatically achieved your 20% lighting reduction. Thank you very much.
Mahalo, Mr. Wick. Are there any questions for the testifier? Hearing none, sensing none. Mahalo again. Ms. Sakamoto?
Good afternoon, Council Member Stephanie Sakamoto on behalf of BIA Hawaii. Our codes expert was unable to join us today, but we just wanted to thank the council members and OCCSR for continuing to work with us on this bill. We continue to be opposed to certain sections of the bill only as illustrated in our testimony. Generally, we just have concerns about the effect on the cost of housing in Hawaii. Thank you.
Okay, mahalo. Are there any questions for the testifier? Sensing none, if there are any unregistered testifiers here, if you could identify yourself. Seeing none, we'll turn to remote testifiers. I had first Mark Glick, followed by Will Kane, followed by Evan Wee. Is Mark Glick online?
Chair, the testifier has not joined the meeting.
Okay, we'll go next to Mr. Kane.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. Will Kane on behalf of Hawaii Gas. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. And we are support the intent of this bill to update the energy codes in Honolulu. We still have some concerns with language, and we've been working with OCCSR and proposed some amendments to address those concerns to ensure that these proposed ordinances do not conflict with current state statute. I'm happy to answer any questions at this time. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Mr. Kane. Any questions for the testifier? Hearing none. Thank you for your time today. Turning next to Evan Wee, followed by Caroline Carl.
Chair, Evan has not joined the meeting.
Okay, mahalo, Madam Clerk. Ms. Carl, are you online?
I'm here. Aloha, Chair and Vice Chair and members of the committee. Carolyn Carl testifying on behalf of Hawaii Energy. I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to provide comments in support of Bill 4. Hawaii Energy works to empower island families and businesses to make smart energy choices to reduce energy consumption, save money, and pursue our 100% clean energy future. And we believe that this updated energy codes are critical to this effort. So we support the adjustments to the IECC 2018 to ensure the code makes sense for Hawaii. And we also support the intent to for the energy stretch code amendments to open up the opportunity for increased collaboration to enable high performance buildings to better support the grid as we bring on more renewables. So thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of Bill 4, and we feel the sensible energy code amendments in the proposed Building Energy Conservation Code for the city and county are a critical choice for Oahu to take another step forward in our transition to 100% clean energy. So thank you.
Mahalo for that. Committee members, any questions for the testifier? Sensing none, thank you for your time today. And then the last remote registered testifier, I believe, was Angela Young.
Chair, she has not joined the meeting.
Okay. And then I would just ask, are there any unregistered testifiers online that would like to testify?
Chair, there are none.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. So we'll close testimony and go to Director Gonser with his presentation.
Aloha, good afternoon. Matt Gonser, Executive Director for the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency. Thank you, Committee Chair Wire, Vice Chair Kia Aina, and Council members. Appreciate the opportunity also to share with some that aren't on the committee, because this is a great opportunity to sort of get ahead for the next discussions at full council. Ultimately, here on behalf of this partnership effort with the Department of Planning and Permitting, and appreciate the opportunity to sort of step back about what the intention and the opportunities are, and then answer any questions on the specifics and some of the testimony that we've heard today. Just as a point of reference and context, we heard mention of the state and city's clean energy goals. Just want to make sure that council is aware and that we highlight and acknowledge this generational investment by the federal government to support and drive both climate action and affordability. And as much as in the past we've already covered things that are readily available to us as individuals and consumers, there is actually a lot of resources available for building owners, operators, and maintainers, and for builders and developers. And just to highlight a couple of those things in the Federal Inflation Reduction Act, this could include a $2,500 dwelling unit tax credit for Energy Star new construction, a $5,000 dwelling unit credit for Department of Energy Zero Energy Ready homes, up to $5 per square foot tax deduction depending on the amount of energy efficiency. Additionally, there's a lot of money available for solar and storage tax credits, and depending on those individuals and occupants that you're serving, you can actually add 10%, 20%, another 10%, another 10% for really extreme savings on investing and installing these renewable energy products. And then additionally, a last highlight is a 30% tax credit for electrical vehicle charging infrastructure, specifically in low-income neighborhoods. So again, just as a backdrop, we're here talking about establishing a city-based code, but there's a lot of opportunity to support both the construction development and going above and beyond the code. And also for awareness, we're on a cycle of updating codes, and we appreciate the leadership and the participation of DPP at the State Building Code Council. We have a representative from the State Energy Office here with us today. And Council has also articulated through various policy guiding documents that we think it's also important to make sure that we're taking stock and progressing on our family of codes. Really, in the energy space in particular, adopting latest codes is really one of the most important measures for driving energy efficiency and cost savings for occupants that will be in those buildings, whether it's a resident or an office space. And just in general for codes, we know the further behind our codes get, the further at risk our building stock is. And that could leave residents vulnerable to hazards, but also hinder their ability to benefit from cost savings. We want to make sure that our workforce continues to be trained and up to speed on latest technologies and installations, and codes are one way to ensure that we work together on all those efforts. And the Energy Code is just one of a suite of codes. The Energy Code, the Building Energy Conservation Code at the city, sets the minimum efficiency for new construction. And this assures reductions in energy use, reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, as we heard from testifiers, as well as increased cost savings for those occupants over the life of the building. A lot of the other codes have been recently updated. Currently, the building code is being negotiated with stakeholders in advancement of its introduction. Typically, those other codes go through the zoning committee, but we're happy to talk about this one here with you today. And really for the administration, recognizing that we have such pressing challenges around housing, affordability, as well as climate, the charge was put to us to think through how do we address both upfront construction costs and immediate and long-term utility costs. So a lot of the really in-depth stakeholder engagement has been guided by these kinds of questions. How do we move towards performance, which affords choice, right? Don't tell us what to do, but help us know what the goal is so that we can use our expertise to get there. Some of these measures do additionally support market leadership. We heard mention of the completely voluntary stretch code, which can support those that are inclined. It gives them a better guide and a pathway to go above and beyond. And then really absent an opportunity to address and update our codes locally, we wouldn't have had the opportunity to really key in on some of those things that don't necessarily fit for our context, and that we can eliminate them as code requirements, but also don't lose on performance, which is really, really critical. So it was really with this mindset that we started an open engagement process a year ago this month. And this really kicked off with direct one-on-one meetings with a lot of industry stakeholders, building owners, developers, designers, as well as those from the environmental space. You can see sort of the timeline and the progression here. We had additionally thematic panels looking at some of the big overarching approaches around making it fit for Oahu, stretching our savings, and ensuring performance. And then, we really benefited from the industry coming together with a newly formed codes committee out of the Building Industry Association of Hawaii. It provided us a direct focal point to have this really continued ongoing dialogue moving forward, which ultimately led to a draft bill that was shared with all the stakeholders in November of last year. So we're glad to see continued progress as a lot of these things have been, on people's minds, thinking through now the nitty-gritty of the fine-tuning. And just to remind ourselves again that codes can be complex and stacked. There is an International Energy Conservation Code, which then gets workshopped at the state level, the State Building Code Council. And this is where we're at now, looking at the local amendments for Oahu's unique conditions. And just to wrap up here, keying in on a couple of the items that are really new for us, and then also that some of the testifiers have highlighted. One is an appendix to the code. It's not a requirement. It's a completely voluntary stretch code, which really sets a guiding star for more grid interactivity, finding ways to support those that are interested in thinking about improved design. And then hopefully, we're currently pursuing federal resources that can then support on the incentive side. We know that really would make it a whole package, but currently as written and proposed, it's not required. It just helps set the stage for those that are looking for more information to develop and build higher performing buildings. So it's not prescriptive. It really helps set a pathway for performance. Another sort of stretching the market and finding ways to advance application of certain technologies and design. The proposal is to look at a small segment of the housing market and see if there's opportunities to support, again, even increased performance from the base code, looking at increased insulation, solar reflectance, both on roofs and walls, greater lighting efficiency, looking at certain, but not all, appliances that are readily available and could be grid interactive, which is really something of interest from the utility. They see more need for sharing the resource of electricity, and then some additional requirements if that single-family dwelling unit, interior space 4,000 square feet and above, has 2,000 square feet or more of conditioned space. Are there ways to even get greater efficiency through energy modeling and other demand response capabilities? So this is really about working with a small segment that doesn't negatively impact affordable housing, seeing if there are ways to get more market penetration of appliances that are readily available, and think through other ways that we can train the workforce to think about the kinds of things that might be more of interest for folks later down the road. And then really lastly, keying in on measures for short and long-term costs. One measure is carrying forward something that is city law today, which is EV and PV ready for residential structures and EV ready for commercial code. So this is something that we need to reinsert into our local code because it's not part of the state's base code. And then again, because of the engagement process, we found ways to address certain opportunities for cost-cutting measures that don't impede upon building performance and cost savings for the individuals. And this includes certain requirements for floor insulation, looking at ways to provide more exemptions, different options and choices from the requirements for daylighting controls, and removal of a mandate for hot water circulation if you're able to insulate the pipe, which might be a better option for builders and developers. And then lastly, to the CD1 in front of us, we appreciate the Codes Committee and the opportunity to continue to work on reasonable amendments. I think even from some of the testimony, we've had a chance just this week to catch up with testifiers, and we see paths forward on quite a few of them and other things that we'd want to sit with a little bit longer and work with you all on. So just highlighting adjustments that were made based on the discussions, including definitions for light reflectance, different specifications for some of those appliances, and then really keying in on what's available in the market in terms of solar reflectance and not writing something into the code that's not readily available. So thank you again for the opportunity, and happy to take any questions.
Mahalo, Director. Councilmember Toba.
Thanks, Director, and thank you, Chair. The BIA testimony has concerns with the bill, Director Gosner. Have they met with you about these concerns, and do you have any comments to address the concerns?
Yeah, thank you for that. So we've had a great ongoing dialogue. We haven't had specific opportunity as we just received the same testimony that you have. We did have a chance to talk with one of their Codes Committee members, specifically D.R. Horton. We had a phone call with them Wednesday, and certain of the things, one example is a definition. We're in agreement. We think there's ways to readily, amend a word here and there, and those are the things that we would like to keep an open dialogue on moving
It's
forward.
kind of the same concerns as Mr. Kane.
That one in
with the
particular,
language.
around Hawaiian Gas, Hawaii Gas in particular, we see paths forward. We're not in alignment on all of the proposals, but we think that there's a good relationship to keep coming forward with recommendations on solutions.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Any other questions? Councilmember Dos Santos, Tam.
Thank you. I wanted to ask if you could explain the daylighting control issue, because I think that's one that keeps coming up. Mr. Wigg mentioned that. Just for everyone's edification, could you explain what that entails?
Sure, thank you. And I'm happy to introduce the Energy Program Manager from CCSR in particular to talk about both how these are actually more choices and options from, it's an exemption from the requirements in the code, but the technical aspects I'll ask Ben to touch upon. I don't know if you want any of this.
Thank you, council members. And just to repeat the question, make sure I understand, you're asking about the provision that states if construction can achieve 80% of the code required lighting power density, then they're exempt from lighting controls?
Yes, and just in general, the daylighting control, what does this exactly mean to somebody that's not familiar with this?
So daylighting controls in general are a way for lights to interact with the amount of daylight available in a space. And so you'd have daylighting zones on the perimeter of a building and up to a certain amount into the interior. And for those conditions, you'd have a different set of controls for lights because you're basically trying to accommodate for the fact that a light is already coming in naturally via the sun. And so although these are a wonderful design choice and they can really be an excellent element to a building if considered thoughtfully, they're somewhat complicated. And so some projects may choose to not want to go into that complexity. And so this provision is about providing an alternative to that requirement. And so with achieving 80% of the base level code required lighting power density, you then don't have to go into this complex thing. And as Mr. Wigg indicated, it's a fairly simple thing to do these days by utilizing available products in the market.
Okay, and just to clarify in here, the amount of skylight is limited to 6% of the roof area. Is that right, under the code?
I believe that's correct, but sometimes it's pretty easy to get right into the weeds and need to refer back to the book and get into the.
And then I also wanted to ask about something that comes up in the code as well, which is the U factor. Could you explain what that is to us as a lay audience?
Sure. So you're familiar with an R factor or an R value for a piece of insulation, right? That's just the resistive quality of a material in terms of its ability to transfer heat. So a U factor is really just the inverse of an R factor. It's really another way to express it. And so it's some value between 0 and 1. And so let me see, think about this correctly. I'm not going to go further than that because it's, again, important to be as concise but limited in terms of.
But I guess what we're trying to do here is to limit the amount of outside warm heat that comes into a building and also the amount of cool air inside the building that could escape, right? That's sort of the idea behind both the R and U factors?
That's correct, yes.
What are some of the major ways that heat or cool air from inside of a building escapes or hot air from outside comes in that messes with the energy efficiency of a building?
So particular to the revisions we're proposing in this ordinance, it's more about solar gain. So it's not hot air coming in. What it is the sun radiating on, for example, a mass wall and collecting heat, acting as a collector and then having that that mass wall rise in temperature, and then it then radiates heat to both sides as it can later on. So perhaps later in the day, when you get home and you decide to sit down and cook a meal, all of a sudden your apartment starts getting warmer as a result of that western exposure that really gained heat all day long.
Okay. And so besides the walls and the mass walls, what factor do windows have in energy efficiency of a building?
So windows are certainly important, especially for conditioned spaces. I think that it's obvious a lot of folks are familiar with jalousie windows, which really are a wonderful asset for some environments where there's a lot of trade winds. But sometimes jalousie windows can be very problematic if it's a space that you're actually trying to air condition and there's limited airflow, as we all know, because really that cooling just escapes right out through the windows.
So what I'm hearing is an operable window in a large office building actually does not help with energy efficiency and can let cool air out and make the air conditioning system work harder?
I wasn't really speaking to operable windows broadly. I was speaking to jalousie windows in particular because they tend to be a lot leakier than other windows. Certainly, a lot of large commercial buildings do not put operable windows in for the fact that they don't want the user to kind of offset the intent of the mechanical system, but that's a separate conversation.
Agreed. Thank you.
Oh, if you could just state your name for the record as well.
Oh, sorry. Again, Ben Sullivan, Energy Program Manager. Thank you.
Yeah, mahalo. Any other questions for Mr. Sullivan or Director Gonser? Sensing none, I first wanted to say mahalo to CCSR for all the hard work that you're doing, meeting with stakeholders, and as you mentioned, a lot of testimony came in recently, and we're grateful for the additional comments that were provided in the testimony. And I know that's something you mentioned that you're willing to look at and continue to dialogue with stakeholders about, and that's also the process we'll be going through as well. And so I think our goal, I know we talked a little bit before, but you think I know I asked you this question, I think, at the last meeting as well. But by the next committee meeting, do you think that there could be at least some resolution in the sense that all sides will kind of understand, what the various concerns are, and then areas where there is agreement we can probably come to?
Certainly, we're more than willing and available to continue to meet. There are certain things that we were waiting to hear back on. A year into an engagement, we're pleased to see the progress, and we would like to continue to see the progress.
Yeah, appreciate that. And I'm hopeful because I do see, the amount of time and effort that went into the testimony provided as well. And so in terms of the dialogue that's already ongoing, I think my hope is that we'll all kind of come to consensus about being able to move the bill forward after the next committee meeting. So in terms of today, the chair is going to be recommending that we postpone. I'll open up to any discussion or objections or reservations on that. Councilmember Toba?
Yeah, no, if we did a vote, I'll be voting with reservations until we can meet the concerns, like you said, and address, I meet with the stakeholders so that we can address some of the problems in the bill. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Chair recommends that Bill 4 be postponed to the next scheduled committee meeting on Wednesday, May 3rd, 2023. Any discussion, any objections, any reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. Okay, mahalo, Director. Okay. And there being no further business, the meeting is adjourned. Mahalo, everyone.